Thank you for that warm welcome. I appreciate it. It's an honor to be here. Aaron asked me, a few months ago, to be here tonight and to meet many of you beforehand. I can see why you asked me to come, Aaron. It's a great group of people. We feel right at home in our hometown. And I will say, though, there was one question I had, which was, this is the Center for Christian Virtue, and you want your keynote speaker to be a Hindu. Why might that be the case? And if you want the answer to that question, you're going to have to ask Aaron, because I didn't. We were joking around, but maybe we could talk about it in our fireside chat afterwards. But I'll tell you, one of the things that Aaron said that stuck with me was his remarks about that culture of fear in our country. That culture of fear which has spread like an epidemic, faster than COVID-19 across the country. Fear of losing your job, fear of your kids getting a bad grade in school, fear of becoming an outcast in your community. What's really going on there? I'll tell you a story I experienced back when I was a biotech CEO. I'm incredibly proud of our accomplishments as a company in Roivant, which I first founded. One of the medicines we developed, speaking of life, was actually a therapy for kids. 20 kids a year are born with a genetic disease where 100% of those kids died by the age of 3 if untreated. And the therapy that we worked on, thankfully, allows a majority of those kids now to live lives of normal duration as an FDA-approved therapy. So that was the work we were doing as a biotech company. When suddenly something happens in the summer of 2020, in June, George Floyd dies. There's BLM-led, you've heard in the media, mostly peaceful protests, you know what that means, violent riots across this country, including in cities like this one. And then there was an expectation and a call for me as a biotech CEO to make a statement on behalf of BLM, by my employees, by others on the outside. Every biotech CEO, every tech CEO was doing it. I always keep an open mind. I wasn't particularly into politics at that time, but I checked the website of the company. One of the BLM, it's what it is, it's a corporation, it's not really even a nonprofit. What did they say was, they call for the dismantling of the nuclear family structure. That was something I couldn't abide. That's the ultimate gift that I had. I grew up in Cincinnati as the kid of immigrants who came to this country with no money. I didn't grow up in money, but I had the ultimate privilege of 2 parents in the house with a focus on education and instilling in us a belief in God. So why on earth would I personally support an organization that calls for dismantling the nuclear family structure, let alone the fact that this wasn't even the job of a biotech CEO to weigh into a fraught political issue. So I refused to do it, but what I realized was that created a consequence in that moment. 6 months later, 3 of the most prominent advisors to my company's advisory board resigned. And that left me with a choice of whether we were going to bend the knee to this new religion. And I'll come back to that theme a couple of times tonight of religion. Bend the knee to this new religion, or to actually speak my mind as a citizen. I could have signed up to the BLM pledge. I could have made the token donation that was expected of CEOs and moved on and called it a day. But I decided in that moment to step down from my job as a biotech CEO and actually to speak my mind freely as a citizen. Thank you, I appreciate that, but I'm glad I did. I think that one of the things that I've recognized from traveling this country over the last year as a presidential candidate is that we're not actually as divided as we're taught to believe as Americans. We are in the middle of a war in this country. I won't mince words about that, but it's not a war between 50% and 50% in this country. It's a war between most of us in the United States of America who agree on our founding ideals, who agree that you get ahead in this country not on the color of your skin, but on the content of your character and your contributions, who agree that you have the right to speak your mind freely and to worship freely as long as I get that same right in return, who believe that a nation has a border, who believes that these ideals form the backbone of the greatest nation known to mankind. That's one side of this war. And then you have the other side of this war, which believes that, you know what? Censorship is the way to go. That group quotas defeat meritocracy, that we got to apologize for our national identity and who we are. But it's not 50-50 between the sides of these wars. It's easily 80-20 in our favor. And I'll say half the 20% on the other side are really people younger than me who never learned those ideals in the first place. And I think we can bring them along too. So what I realized is in that moment where I had to step down from my job as being a CEO of a biotech company, I wrote my first book, Woke Inc. back then, I was angry. I wrote from a position of frustration and anger at this culture of fear in our country, recognizing that most Americans have common sense, but the thing that we actually lack is courage. And I believe that to be true. Most of us know behind closed doors that there are two genders, that the nuclear family is the greatest form of governance known to mankind. Know that parents should be the one determining the education of their children, that an open border isn't a border, that reverse racism is racism. Most of us recognize this behind closed doors. That's common sense. The thing we lack is actually courage. And I was angry about that at first, but I think one of the things I've realized about my own journey is that sometimes that anger clouds our judgment too. Stops us from seeing the essence of what the heck is really going on in the country. And so one of the things I've tried to do over the course of not only the campaign, but even the time we have afterwards, is to take a step back and ask, what the heck is actually going on in our country right now? You hear about the travails here, even in the state of Ohio, a Republican-led state with Republican legislature in both chambers, having trouble passing a bill that says children should not be subject to genital mutilation and chemical castration until the age of 18 at least. And by the way, that women should not be competing with men and men should not be competing with women in women's sports. So what the heck is going on in our country that accounts for where we are right now? I think it's something deeper. I'll walk you through it. Think of it, we're not going to get angry about it. Let's just think of it case by case. A few years ago when that George Floyd case happened, what do we have in this country? A new culture of fear that says your identity is based on your race and your skin color. That if you're black, you're disadvantaged. And that if you're white, you're inherently privileged. Now, Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley of the Squad at the time, she summarized this pretty well when she said that we don't want any more black faces that don't want to be a black voice. We don't want any more brown faces that don't want to be a brown voice, end quote. Now, that doesn't make sense because that runs contrary to the very civil rights movement that they purport to represent. Martin Luther King, who said, we will be judged not on the color of our skin, but on the content of our character. These two things don't make sense at the same time if you're operating according to principles of logic. But they do if you're operating according to a different quasi-religious belief system, a cult-like belief system. That's this cult of racial identity that we saw emerge in this country a few years ago. But we'll leave that one over there. Then you see the emergence of the same pattern again with the LGBTQIA plus movement across the country, really picking up steam in the years that followed. There's so many letters, they put a little plus at the end. Think about this one. The same movement that says the sex of the person you're attracted to is hardwired on the day you're born. That was the core premise of the gay rights movement, for gay rights to count as a civil right. The sex of the person you're attracted to is hardwired on the day you're born. Is the same movement that now says that your own biological sex is totally fluid over the course of your lifetime. Again, these two things can't make sense at the same time if you're operating according to principles of logic. And I could go on all day about this one. I mean, there is no gay gene, and yet there are two definitive sex chromosomes, and yet the one is considered to be fluid and the other one considered not. That doesn't make sense unless you're subscribing to a religious-like belief system. So you got the cult of racial identity, you've got the cult of gender identity, then you get to the new latest cult that's emerged in this country. The cult that says we must stop burning carbon emissions in the United States at all costs in the name of staving off global climate change, even as we're perfectly fine shifting those same carbon emissions to places like China in the name of stopping global warming. That doesn't make any sense, again, if you're applying principles of logic. Or the same people who are opposed to fossil fuels in the United States also being the very people who are most opposed to nuclear energy, the greatest form of carbon-free energy production known to mankind. Again, these two things can't make sense at the same time if you're operating according to reason. But they can make sense. You can believe all these things at the same time. The facts don't matter if you're adopting a new religious belief system. And I hesitate to call it religious because a religion has withstood the test of time. These have not. This is closer to a cult than a religion. The question is, what the heck is going on in our country that we see the rise of these different secular cults at the exact same time? Not in an angry way, but in a curious way. What the heck is going on in our country? And I think it's what the pastor said right beforehand, right before I came up here. We're in the middle of a national identity crisis right now. We are lost. Aaron shared the story from Deuteronomy. We'll rewind that one a little further back to the book of Exodus. When the Israelites are lost in the desert, on their way to that promised land, yet to find it, what do they say? We want to go back and be ruled by the Pharaoh. There's something native in us. We hunger to be part of something bigger than ourselves. And yet when we can't name what that is, we relocate our religious instincts to new religions instead. When faith, family, patriotism, and hard work disappear, we replace them with new religions like wokeism or transgenderism or climatism or COVIDism or Zelenskyism. That's a slightly more controversial one, but I'll throw out my view on that. But it's one after the other, and it's not a coincidence that we see these same religions at the same time. They're substitutes for the real thing. There's a hole in our heart. There's an old expression from Blaise Pascal, a scientist. He goes, if there's a hole the size of God in your heart and God does not fill it, something else will instead. That's what's going on in the country right now, especially amongst young people. I'm 38. I'm no longer, as young as we once thought, but I'm the youngest person ever to run for U.S. president as a Republican. And I can tell you, thank you. I can tell you, speaking as a member of my generation, I think a lot about the next generation. I'm joined by my 4-year-old son, Karthik, tonight, and my lovely wife, Apurva, who came here after a long day of surgery at OSU. We think about this a lot in the next generation. What's going on in that next generation is we are hungry for a cause, actually. We are starved for purpose and meaning and identity at a time in our history when the things that used to fill that void, they have disappeared. They are gone. And so we latch on to these new causes to substitute for our search for purpose and meaning. For a while, even outside the realm of religion or faith or family, that used to come in the form of civil rights. The struggle for civil rights was all about getting to the promised land of racial equality before the law in this country. That it's weird. When you get right to the doorstep of almost the promised land, almost the land of milk and honey that Martin Luther King would have envisioned 60 years ago. It's precisely then, when you've had a black president, when you've had a black attorney general, when you have equal rights across this country, 60 years after the passage of the Civil Rights Statutes, it's precisely then that we concoct new myths about systemic racism and white rage and white guilt. It's interesting how that works. You get to a point in our history where you can say where you are on this debate. It doesn't matter. You can marry who you want, if you want, in the United States of America. That's exactly when you get to obsessing over now the new cult of gender identity. And so it's almost as though we're starving to fill that void with something greater that we're missing. And this is actually my criticism of the conservative movement, odd as that might sound. We need to level up and do more than we have to date. So far, what we're obsessed with, and we get stuck in this, it's like we're mired in the mud of criticizing what the other side fills that void with. Race, gender, sexuality, climate. And we're addicted to criticizing that alternative vision, but without offering an alternative vision of our own. What do we actually stand for? That's a lot harder to do. That's hard work. Criticizing the other side's vision, that's easy. Offering an alternative vision of our own, that's hard. Individual. The value of each individual. Family, nation, God. That beats race, gender, sexuality, and climate if we have the courage to actually stand for something. The idea that you are an individual, endowed with your own agency by God to achieve the maximum of your God-given potential as an individual, not riding some tectonic plate of group identity, but the idea that you are free to achieve whatever you want with your own hard work and commitment and dedication in this short time we're given on this earth. That you're a member of a family with a mother and a father, and that family unit matters and it grounds us in who we are. That you are sovereign as a family. That you are a citizen of a sovereign nation, the United States of America. Not some nebulous citizen, vaguely global citizen fighting climate change, but a citizen of this nation, founded on ideals, the greatest ideals known to man, and that we are one nation under God. That isn't a 4-letter word, but one nation under God that our founding fathers envisioned when they set our country into motion. That's what I think we ought to level up and stand for as conservatives, is an alternative vision of our own, who we really are as Americans. And I think that's what we're missing. That's part of what pulled me into this unusual world of politics in America. I was in the world of business before, but I saw that red wave that never came in November of 2022. Remember that? Why was it? They tried to blame everything from Donald Trump to abortion. I reject that narrative. First of all, what's the point of winning elections if you compromise on the very things you're fighting for? That's going through the motions, right? It doesn't matter. But I think actually none of those things accounted for the real loss. I think the reason we'd had that red wave that never came, and I'm keen to talk about it this year to make sure it doesn't happen again, is that we can't win the long-run war. I said we're in the middle of a war in this country. We won't win that war by actually focusing on the enemy. We're going to win that war by focusing on ourselves and what we actually value and defining who we really are as conservatives and as Americans. And I think that that's the task ahead of us. That's hard work cut out ahead of us. It's going to require some measure of sacrifice to stand for those values. Well, I'll close with this before we move on to our Q&A. Aaron and I are going to have a discussion, and then we're just going to open this up and have a more fluid conversation. Without a sacrifice, we're not going to have a country left. Without each of us being willing to make that sacrifice, do that hard work of passing on our own values to our kids, even when it's hard, not just when it's easy, but when it's hard. Even when it comes at the cost of taking some risk of losing your job or getting that bad grade in school or becoming that outcast in your community. That's what it's going to require to get this country back. Now, against the backdrop of our founding fathers, I think that should be an easy sacrifice for us to make. We talk a lot about the importance of teaching our kids history. Sometimes I think it's just easier to just talk about our actual history. There were 56 men who signed the Declaration of Independence. And by the way, before I talk about that, how great were those kids who read the preamble to the Constitution? Apurva and I were floored. We were humbled. Karthik enjoyed watching those kids actually know something about their country. Well, the preamble to the Constitution, that was in 1789. Just in 1776, a little over a decade before, 56 men signed the Declaration of Independence. What happened to them? We celebrate them. Do we actually stop and pause and ask ourselves, whatever happened to those 56 men? 5 of them were captured by the British, tortured until their death. 12 of them had their homes ransacked and burned. 9 of them died in the Revolutionary War. 2 more of them had their own children die in the Revolutionary War. Many of them died in debt because they had their own property seized. They knew what they were getting into. They knew the risks that they were taking. They didn't take these risks for them. They did it for us. If we're going to face our founding fathers in the afterlife, I got this line from Bernie Moreno. I'm going to share it with all of you tonight, is when we face our founding fathers in the afterlife, and they ask us, what sacrifice did you make for your country? We better have a darn good answer to give them. And the least we can do today, in this moment we live in, is to speak our minds in the open. To say in public what you will say in private at the dinner table. To say it with a spine. Say it with conviction. Say it with respect. But part of respect is that you respect your neighbor enough to tell him what you actually think. And that's what's going to start that epidemic of courage in this country. Fear has been infectious, but you know what? Courage can be contagious too. It just requires more of us willing to stand up with the spine and actually show it. Show it to our kids and show it to the next generation. Show them what our founding fathers gave us 250 years in. If we want another 250 years left, we're going to have to make some of those same sacrifices today. We live in a 1776 moment. And I'll close this out on a positive note. That's a pretty special time to be alive, actually. Imagine what it would have been like to be alive in the spring of 1776, before that July 4th. That's the moment we live in. Now, our founding fathers, they could have called themselves victims of a British monarchy, gone the way of cowering in the face of fear. But they didn't do that. They stood up to the strongest empire in the world and declared victory based on their vision of what was right, what was true. Well, we live in that 1776 moment today. It is a special time to be alive in our country if we open our eyes and seize it. Worry less about what the enemy has on us and worry more about what we have to stand on over them. And if we do that, then I don't think we have to anymore be this country in decline. That we don't have to be at the end of this ancient Roman Empire of a moment that we're taught to believe that we're in. But that we can be, not in some fake politician way, but in a true way, that we can be a country whose best days are still actually ahead of us. A country that's still on its way up, in our ascent, maybe even the early stages of our ascent. That's what I see, and that's what our founding fathers saw 250 years ago. But it isn't going to happen automatically. And in this civic realm of our lives, if we're going to be saved, it isn't going to be somebody coming from on high from the White House or any governor's mansion to save us. If we're going to be saved, it is going to be because we save ourselves, that every one of us steps up and does our part. People like Aaron Bayer, people like every one of you today supporting the CCV here in Ohio, people like parents showing up at school board meetings across this state and across this country. People who are standing up for truth without fear. That's how we're going to get this country back. And if we do, and if you do, and if we do, I am confident that, yes, may our best days be ahead of us, and may we have another 250 years and then some left in our American journey. So thank you all. God bless you and your families. And may God bless our great state of Ohio and the United States of America.